He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Kia ora, and a very warm welcome to the Kākāpō Files from RNZ. Ko Alison Ballance aho. It's early 2026. Happy New Year, everyone. And it's the start of a breeding season for our favourite giant flightless night parrot. This is episode 4. Any minute now. A week ago, we heard how Pearl and Boss were the first Kākāpō off the blocks in the mating game, and I can't wait to hear what's happened since then. On the phone with the latest breaking news from Kākāpō HQ is technical advisor Daryl Eason. Kia ora, Daryl.
Kia ora, Alison. Lovely to hear from you.
I gather you're in Invercargill en route to Whenua Hou.
I am. I'll be heading out on Wednesday.
Oh, well, safe flight. But before you head away, you're on the line from Invercargill with breaking news from the Kākāpō Islands. Tell me, has there been any more mating?
There has. Actually, last night, Esperance and Ian mated. From what we can gather, it was probably around about 3 in the morning.
Fantastic. So this breeding season is actually going to how you thought it might. So Pearl and Boss mated exactly a week ago. They were first cabs off the rank. And you said in an earlier episode that Pearl would probably go first and then there'd be a gap of maybe a week before the rest of the birds started taking action, and you're bang on the money.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, that seems to be the way it goes. Pearl's always a bit earlier than everyone else. And now I suspect that Esperance has started. There will be gradually increasing numbers of mating and then move to a bit of a run. I think that things are going to be a little bit later on anchor this year, just to do it how the weather's been over the springtime. So no action from them just yet.
But our second mating on the board, so Esperance, she's the daughter of Flossie, isn't she?
That's right, yeah. So she hatched in 2001 too, Flossie's daughter.
Well, that's great, because I'm featuring Flossie later in the episode in the Overachievers section. So she's one of Flossie's 12 offspring. And we also talk a bit about her sister Rakiora, who's also a bit of an overachiever in the breeding section.
Yes, she is, yeah.
So Esperance has had a few offspring, but not as many as her sister.
That's right, yes.
Esperance has tended to lay a lot more infertile or early embryo death eggs, so she hadn't done as well. She's a great mum though. So last season she fostered
one of Tohu's chicks, which went very well.
And what can you tell me about Ian?
Ian is the son of Luke and Suzanne from the 2011 season. Yeah, so I think he had his first booming and mating season in 2022. He mated with Sue, but she didn't go on to lay eggs. So this is potentially his first opportunity to have chicks.
So Pearl and Boss only mated the once?
They did. Yes, so that isn't the best scenario. So
If a bird mates only once, there's usually only about a 50% chance of the eggs being fertile. Yeah, I think from her activity last night, she's dropped down to 4 hours from around about 9 hours normally. So I suspect if she hadn't laid last night, she's about to start nesting.
And how often does she lay her eggs? Is there a day or two between eggs?
It's 3 days between eggs. So we expect her to lay about 3 eggs. And it's going to take her 6 days from the first one.
Oh, well, we'll just have to keep our fingers crossed for the fertility.
The unfortunate name of the game in Kākāpō, there's always a lot of egg failure. So
If she has failed, there's plenty of time for her to nest again if we take them away, or we'll
think about who else might be nesting and whether it's worth keeping her aside as a foster mum.
And any other news from the Kākāpō Islands?
Yeah, unfortunately there was a death on Anchor Island, and that was
Tō Kuhurangi.
He died just 3 days ago, I think.
And he had a wing injury. He just lost condition from that. He injured that quite badly.
Oh, so what can you tell me about him? He's quite a young bird still, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was from the 2016 season, Tūneke's son. He was born on the 29th of February, so
his name is to do with the leap year. So yeah, he had only just been getting started out on ink grinding.
Oh, well, that's always very sad news to hear of a kakapo death, so that brings the population down to 236?
Yes, that's right.
Now, I am always amazed by how much we now know about kakapo, given that just 50 years ago we knew almost nothing about their biology or their behaviour. For example, when the Wildlife Service started work in Fiordland in the 1970s, it was assumed that kakapo would form pairs, like most birds. But no, turned out they're lek breeders, with the male kakapo competing to put on the best booming display to try and attract as many females as possible to mate with. We've learned a lot since then, and one of the exciting new frontiers of knowledge and conservation is in the area of genetics. This is something that science advisor Andrew Digby is very interested in, and he's been instrumental in a genome project called Kākāpō 125.
Kākāpō 125 is this project that we started in 2015 to sequence the genomes of all Kākāpō. So the genome is the set of all genes of an individual. And in 2015, a group in Duke University in the United States published the first genome of the Kākāpō. And so that was a representative of just one individual, Jane, and so that was a single individual. And at the time, there were 125 Kākāpō in existence, and we thought, well, if we've done one, why don't we do them all? So that's what we did. We set up this program, and we had a lot of support, a lot of funding support too, to sequence all of the genes of all of the Kākāpō. And we've kept that going. And so now we have around about 350 genomes for all of the living Kākāpō and quite a lot of the dead ones as well. And that's a fantastic genetic resource. So what we want that to be used for, and we've opened that up to researchers around the world. Anyone who wants to work on those data can. We want to use it to further Kākāpō conservation, to try and help solve some of those problems that we have. Things like infertility and disease. What is the genetic basis for those? And then how can we try and mitigate it?
Is that a bit of a world first?
As far as I know, I think other species have got a lot of genomes done for individuals, but I think Kākāpō have probably got the most comprehensive genetic data set of any species on the planet, simply because there's not many Kākāpō and we have the genomes of all of them at present. And we're looking to keep that going. So this next breeding season, we'll sequence the genomes of all of the chicks that survive. Again, we're not quite sure how much longer we'll keep that going, but yeah, we should have some more genomes this time next year.
So what kind of results are you getting? Have you got any from that genomic project?
Yes, we have had some really interesting ones. There's one paper which was led by Joseph Goulin at Otago University in 2023, and that was like an overview of the genomic data. And one of the things which we were pleased about is that it kind of verified the genetic management that had been done up until that point and said that it was doing a good job at maintaining genetic diversity. And it also showed that some of the Fiordland Kākāpō, so these are the birds which came from Fiordland as opposed to Rakiura Stewart Island, they have some genetic variants associated with things like higher fitness and fertility. They're genetically quite different, and so we want to continue to breed those into the population.
Of course, you can look at all the different kinds of genes and go, these are genes associated with fertility, these are genes associated with feather colour or something like that. So you can really dig into that data, can't you?
Yeah, and at the moment, we've only just scratched the surface. You know, there's so much more to learn. And, you know, this is a resource which will be continued to be used for decades to come for the benefit of Kākāpō. So we're quite excited about that. We've had some really interesting results initially. Quite a fascinating one is about plumage colour in Kākāpō. So we have two morphs of Kākāpō, a green and an olive morph. And researcher Laura Urban and her collaborators identified the gene which was responsible for that colour and did some work as well and trying to understand why these colour morphs might have come about too.
And what did she decide?
The hypothesis was that it could have been due to predation by extinct predators, things like Haast eagle and Isles harrier. The Kākāpō used to be more common and the green morph used to be more common, whereas now it's actually olive. And the thinking was that the olive Kākāpō are actually less visible. She did some work on the feathers, showed that they're less reflective. They might have been less visible to those predators, those avian predators, which hunt by sight. And so they had an advantage. And so now we've had a flip. It used to be about 70% green and now more of them are olive. But without that selection pressure anymore, because those predators are extinct, then in future we might expect to see the colours change. And although there's not a direct conservation application of that, I think it's a really good example of the power of genetics. Because, what if we can identify some of the genes responsible for infertility, for example, or for diseases, and then that will help us then genetically manage the population for better productivity in the future.
Andrew mentioned they have about 360 genomes from individual kakapo, living and dead. Well, I've been digging around, again, in the list of kakapo names, and about a quarter of those genomes come from the descendants of just one female, Flossie. Flossie is by any measure a very successful kakapo. In fact, she's the most successful female kakapo. Flossie is a founder bird, one of the originals from Rakiura, Stewart Island. But she's also the reason we have a Fiordland dynasty of kakapo, as she was the only female to mate with Richard Henry, the sole Fiordland bird. She's the mother of his 3 offspring, Kuia, Sinbad and Gulliver. Flossie has 12 offspring, 8 daughters and 4 sons. She is grandmother to 40 and great-grandmother to a further 34. That's a very grand total of 86 direct descendants, almost all of whom are still alive. Now here's a thing, 40% of Flossie's descendants come from the family line of just one daughter, Rakiura. She's as prolific as her mum. On the other hand, Flossie has 2 other daughters and 2 sons who have not produced any offspring. So, some kakapo are overachievers and others, not so much. This is why the Kākāpō team is putting so much effort into genetic rescue, and why knowing the genomes of every bird is so useful to ensure that the full range of genes that exists at the moment is passed on. Ironically, the late Jane, whose genome is the original 5-star platinum genome for kakapo, well, she never bred. And when it comes to males, the most successful male kakapo is Blades. He has 19 direct offspring. And although that's quite a few more than Flossie's 12, do remember that all he contributes is sperm, whereas Flossie has to incubate her eggs and then raise all her offspring to independence on her own. Because they were almost too successful at passing on their genes, Flossie and Blades were relocated to Hauturu Little Barrier Island a few years ago. This was part of a trial to see if kakapo could breed there without any management. The 2 birds were known breeders and would almost certainly breed again if conditions were right. However, it didn't matter if they didn't produce any offspring either. That trial did not prove to be a success. Flossie is now on Pukenui Anchor Island, and Blades is testing the suitability of Coal Island for kakapo. He's there with 28 other males that are currently not considered critical for breeding. I thought you might like to hear why Blades is so popular with the females. Here's a track I recorded a few years ago of Blades in full voice. This is chinging, and each night during the breeding season he will be alternating bouts of deep, resonant booming with bouts of this very directional call. He'll boom about 10,000 times a night and ching about 14,000 times. Compared to many other males, his chinging is very loud, fast, regular and sustained. This one bout goes on for 90 seconds without him seeming to draw breath. No wonder he's such a stud. And that's the Kākāpō Files for another week. A very big thanks to Daryl Eason and Andrew Digby from the Kākāpō Recovery Program at the New Zealand Department of Conservation. This episode was mixed by Elliot Childs and Phil Benge and produced with help from RNZ's Liz Garton and Brianna Uritich-Gregg. If you're enjoying the Kākāpō Files, please rate and review us. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, and we are also available at rnz.co.nz. You can also send in your burning questions to kakapo@rnz.co.nz. I'm Alison Ballance, and I'll be back in a week with more breaking Kākāpō news. Bye for now From me and Blades, mā te wā.